On this week's Sportlight Podcast, we talk to Melissa Nash. She is the owner and operator of one of the largest lacrosse clubs here in the state of Utah. She also played college lacrosse at BYU and coaches the high school girls lacrosse team at Brighton High School. She shared some things about women's sports, some dynamics that exist in women's sports that are unique, and it was super enlightening to hear her insights. We also talked about the lessons she has learned in relation to the E4A principles. It was an awesome discussion. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Sportlight Podcast for parents, coaches, and athletes. The Sportlight refers to the time in an athlete's life when they have increased ability to affect the culture around them and the increased opportunity to learn life's lessons through sports. This podcast aims to help parents and coaches capitalize on their athletes' precious time in the Sportlight. The Sportlight Podcast is brought to you by Especially for Athletes program.
Well, Melissa, you go by Nash, not Melissa. Everyone knows you as Nash. Is that right?
That's the one.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to have you on. Just to give people a little bit of background here, you are the owner-operator of the lacrosse club Utah Elevate, and you're also the head girls lacrosse coach at Brighton High School, played lacrosse in college at Brigham Young University, and played all sports growing up from our pre-conversation, and just settled on lacrosse and your love for that. But we're so excited to have you on and to talk about lacrosse and what you've learned there, but also women's sports in general and the lessons you've personally learned through athletics. So thanks for joining us and for being on our podcast today.
Thank you. I'm honored. I was looking through your podcast and it was like all these famous people on there. So I'm honored to be included in the mix.
Yeah.
You're now famous, Nash. It's hard for me to call you Nash. You're Melissa to me, but I'll try. So Nash, why don't you kind of fill everybody in? You and I met, I don't know, a month or so ago. And then since then, we've had a couple of phone calls, and then we met once in person and talked quite a bit. What drew you to Especially for Athletes? That night that I spoke at Brighton High School, you came up right after, and we ended up speaking with the principal of the high school and the athletic director for probably a good, 30 minutes or so after. What was so appealing to you? It's not every time we present that we get coaches that come. We want them to come, but when we do get them to come and they stick around and want to talk after, it's awesome. So what drew you to want to know more about Especially for Athletes?
Yeah, I was in the back of that auditorium listening to you speak, and I was typing notes in my phone like crazy because everything you said, I was like, yes, I want my program to be that. I want my girls to do that. I need to be better at that as a coach. So there was a couple of things that you specifically said that I was like, yes, this. And in my head, I'm like, that could be our team motto. I took notes about you said about doing it by design, not by default. And I loved that. I love the concept of eyes up and do the work. I was a high school teacher for 9 years, and I just saw so many kids that wanted certain goals or they wanted to get a good grade on a test, but they didn't necessarily put the effort in on the back end. So all the principles of Especially for Athletes was really like exactly what I'm trying to base my program on and what I used to base my classroom on. Doing the work, taking initiative, being a good person. Like my number one rule in my classroom was to be kind. And I think athletes especially have that mantle on their shoulder where they need to be kind to everybody around them, even during the hard games.
I'm going to throw what I think is a tough question at you, because it's a tough one to me when I get asked it. And even when I ask other people about it, I don't know exactly where I'm at on it, I guess. And I should, because I talk about this all the time in presentations and as well as on this with Shad. But so I've coached hundreds and hundreds of games. I'm a head coach currently of a high school. And this idea of competing, but also being kind can be hard because we say compete without contempt. We don't necessarily say compete and be kind. Maybe we just say compete and don't hate, don't have contempt. But how do you balance the competitive edge that you have, that you do have to have some pretty serious drive and you have to have a killer instinct to really be successful in a game. But at the same time, be kind, right? I mean, how do you do that?
I think I love that question because I think especially in female sports, I think it's kind of tricky because I think girls have a double standard of they can't be a fierce competitor and a kind girl. But I think really you can do both. And I think it's really important for me as a coach to kind of set that standard for my team to compete without contempt. I want to win. My girls will tell you more than anyone, I love winning and I love competing. But I also know that it's just a game. At the end of the day, it's a game and we all go home and we're all humans. And you don't know what that referee is fighting in their normal everyday life or what that other coach is or what those girls are going through. So I think it's it's like a small scale example of a big life event where you can learn how to compete without contempt and, play hard and play your hardest and don't be afraid to take elbows and things like that. But also when you knock them down, help them up. After the game, shake hands and really mean your good game handshake. I think that makes a huge difference.
So what I'm hearing is, because what I would explain is that being kind doesn't mean that you don't play physical. Being kind doesn't mean that you have to say you're sorry if you hit somebody hard, right? Or if you make a big play that you can't celebrate or that you can't have some excitement and some let go of some energy when you make a big play. What we say by contempt, and then Shad, I'm really curious your thoughts on this because we've obviously talked about this a lot, is that when the hate creeps in, that the reason I hit you hard is because I want to ruin you or I want to embarrass you and I intend to tell you about it after and remind you about it on social media after, or show you up and stand over you and F-bomb you in your face after. That's the contempt and the unsportsmanlike that we mean when we say compete without contempt. It doesn't mean don't knock them on their butt. Knock them on their butt. If it's part of the game, do it. But just don't tell them about it with cursing, words and things afterwards. Is that, Shad, is that where you would define the line?
Yeah, I've had a fun discussion as I've gone around this year and done presentations. I've actually opened it up for discussion and asked, when does it cross the line? One of the things that they've said is when it's focused on toward your own team, it doesn't seem to cross as many lines as when it goes to the other, meaning celebrating with your own team. You've just, in lacrosse or in football, you make a great play, you knock someone down. Like in lacrosse, you score a goal, right? There's a totally different feeling when you're running to the other sideline, saying something to their fans or doing something like that, versus when you're running to your own teammates and celebrating something that you just accomplished together. And I think that is a key, Dustin, that I've realized as I've talked to young people and thought, put yourself on the other side of it. When has it felt like other people were being not just competitive, but jerks and punks? And it's when that celebration turns toward the other team instead of toward your own. And I think that might be a big key. What do you think of that as being at least part of that line of competing without contempt?
So my thoughts there, one of my favorite discussion questions in my classroom, it got these kids engaged. I would ask, what's the difference between confidence and cockiness? And Shad, it's exactly what you were saying. Confidence is lifting yourself up and feeling good about yourself and being able to bring others up while you do that, bringing your teammates up. Like, I'm confident in my stick skills, so I can bring my teammate up with me. Where cockiness is exactly that. It's putting other people down. It's putting either your own teammates down, which is obviously a no-no, or going towards that other team, like you said, and really pushing them down. That's cockiness versus confidence. And I think that's exactly playing with confidence versus contempt. It's that same idea there, feeling confident, but not pushing the other people down in the process.
Yeah, I love that. Dustin, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I like that. I think that's exactly it. I struggle with that because I don't want the contempt, but I also want the edge. And, and I was that way. Shad and I were college teammates. It would be hard for me to, have a successful play against somebody and then feel sorry for them that they lost or that they didn't come out, positive in that interaction with me. We're competing against each other. You wanted to take something from me and I took it from you. So sorry, that's the game. But standing over the person or later telling them about it or looking over at the crowd and making a sign or a signal or, those are the kind of things that I think, Shad, you're right. And very few of us, when we see that on the field, are like, wow, that was cool. Right. We all kind of get that feeling of, come on, like that was kind of bush league. You didn't have to do that. Just act like you've been there. Go celebrate with your team. You don't have to show up the other person. But we don't ever, Nash, we never shy away from this. There is a very, and you heard me talk about this when I was speaking, there's a reason it's called compete without contempt, and it's not called sportsmanship. Yes, sportsmanship falls under the compete without contempt chapter in our book and principle, and we talk about it, sportsmanship is part of it. But there's a reason that the principle of our program is that the third principle isn't just sportsmanship. Because yes, be a good sport, but we don't want to undervalue the importance of being a competitor and competing. Nash, I wanted to ask you one other question kind of along this line. You touched on it in your answer earlier. You said something about hard being a girl or a woman athlete and being kind and sweet and also being this fierce competitor. We've talked to some other women on our podcast, and we have a couple that help us with, especially for athletes that were very successful athletes. I've noticed it after they talked to me about it. I hadn't noticed it before. They brought it up, and then I see it all the time now, especially when I watch if I watch a women's sport, where a coach is a woman, even if it's a male sport and the coach is a woman, that when the woman gets angry on the sideline, if she's screaming and yelling at a player, yelling at a referee, it takes people back like, how dare she? What a blank, fill in the word. Sometimes that word starts with a B. I mean, that's it, right? It's just, it is what it is. How dare she act like that? Why is she like that? Man, she's crazy. She's nuts. But when a man does it, it's, man, this guy, look at him demanding excellence of his players, and they respect him, and he's turning them into men, and they got to be able to take it and be tough and resilient and take that fierce, tough coaching from their coach. Why is that? And is that hard, I'm guessing, for you as a coach because it shouldn't be that way, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I see that all the time, even amongst field scheduling, right? Like every coach wants to fight for their program and get the field space that they want at the time that they want. And sometimes I felt like I get looked down upon because I'm fighting for my field time. But in fact, if a male coach did it would be like, he's fighting for his program. Like, he's passionate. He wants his people to succeed, where I feel the same way. And it's exactly the same. Like, if I'm yelling on the sidelines, whether it's at a ref or at my players, sometimes it is looked down upon. Like, she is too intense. I've been called too intense. I've been called too aggressive, too competitive. But then I feel like if a male coach does that, then they care about the program, and it's seen in more of a positive light than a negative light. And it is really hard, because why is there that double standard there? I mean, my team can compete at a really high level too. We've been third in the state the last 3 years in a row, and I expect excellence from my players. And I think, luckily, I do think there's a shift happening, because we're pointing it out. The WNBA has done a great job of pointing out the double standards in the coaches. Nike has an amazing commercial that points out female athletes, Serena and Simone, and all these amazing female athletes who were told that they were crazy, but then they come out on top because of their craziness, quotes, right? Because they really are passionate and they fight for what they want. So
Serena Williams had that, right? She had that intense style about her that when other athletes did the same thing, it was, wow, Kobe Bryant is such a fierce competitor. Michael Jordan is. But when Serena Williams did it, it was like, whoa, easy. Why are you so fired up about the point?
Yeah, it's just a game.
You're the lady. You're supposed to be sweet and kind, and don't act like that. And it's, for anybody that thinks what we're saying isn't true, if you're one of those men that's listening to this that thinks, no, that isn't true, stop it. It's true. It happens. We've all seen it before. We've had that thought. It is. It's just it is a double standard. I hope you're right that it's going away, but it does exist for sure. Sorry, you were saying something else there. I cut you off.
No, my husband has been the same as you. He did not realize it until we've been married for 4 years now. And now, I mean, he's very involved in coaching now that I am, right? And he notices it as well. And he is blown away by it. And I mean, it's going to be a society shift that needs to happen. But the more people that can recognize it, the better. So that double standard goes away.
Well, and I think you mentioned the WNBA, and one of the things that I've noticed as I've watched coverage is, I mean, we're at a unique place right now in women's sports, a lot because of the WNBA, because of what's going on with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and of course there's things that cross lines and everything like that. But I just remember these documentaries, because I grew up in the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson era, right? And I almost see this Larry Bird, Magic Johnson moment happening in the WNBA where, difference in style of play, difference in race, difference and some people want to make a big deal of that when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were actually, they loved competing against one another. But it's almost like it was okay for them. We'll even show these videos of Larry Bird throwing people down or, being tough, throwing the ball at people and all these things. And it's like, dude, that was a sweet rivalry. That was awesome. Now it happens in the WNBA and it's like, whoa. Like, hey, what's up? You guys should be like hugging and apologizing to one another and all these things. And it's like, you see that dynamic and it is being highlighted right now and it's creating discussions like, why isn't it okay? Now, women could cross the line just like men could cross the line. So it's not like there's a free pass given there. There were some dirty things done this year in the WNBA that I would look at and be like, nah, but I would say the same thing about the males. Does that make sense? Like if you ran and knocked someone over just to try to hurt them or intimidate them, you'd be like, nah, that's not right. Like, don't be doing that stuff. But at the same time, we're criticizing people in the WNBA. We're showing videos of Kobe Bryant saying in an Olympic game that he's going to run. I forget who.
Pau Gasol.
Yeah. Pau Gasol. And first play of the game, I'm going to run through him. And he puts down his shoulder and just knocks Pau Gasol down. And we're actually making, these videos are circulating about what an incredible competitor he is. And you use the word double standard, right? And for me, this standard, if it applies to men, it applies to women, but both sides of that coin. Like, I think that was dirty, to go put a shoulder in someone's diaphragm and knock them down. I would, if my player did that, I'd be like, I'm not sure I don't think that's what we're all about, right? Whether you're a man or a woman. I see what you're saying about the double standard, though. The way that that's glorified on one end and demonized on another is that double standard you're talking about.
Yeah, we had a really cool experience kind of along the same lines where literally the LeBron James of women's lacrosse came to our Brighton team retreat last year. Her name's Allie Mastriani. She played at UNC, national champion, UNC member. She's on the USA lacrosse team. She's literally one of the best players in the world. And so we're there. She's doing a question and answer period for our team. And one of my girls raises her hands and says, hey, so you're on UNC and UNC's biggest rival is BC, Boston College. But my player was like, okay, so you're on UNC and then you have to turn around and go play on the USA team with a bunch of Boston College players. And they said, what's it like playing like your biggest rival and then you're on the same team? And I think my players were kind of taken back by Allie's answer because she said, we're great friends. She said exactly what you're saying. We can compete on the field and be fierce competitors and fight till the last minute or the last second of that game. And then literally the next day they're on Team USA and they're practicing together and they're working together towards the same goal. And you see that on the men's side and you see it on the women's side. And I feel like there's kind of exactly that. Like people think it's going to be a little bit different on the female side, but it's the same. Like there has to be a mental shift where Allie is then like, okay, now this girl is on my team and we're fighting towards a goal together.
Allie Bills, who is a close supporter and friend of our program, she speaks with us. She's on our board. years ago, we did an event, and we're going to do it again. We've been meaning to get to it this year, but it's probably not going to happen until hopefully January. Well, you and I have talked about it recently, and especially for female athletes. We did one years and years ago, and she spoke at it, and she said something that I had never thought of before, that I think that watching now since then and having daughters go through competitive sports, I believe it's true. That I'm just curious your thoughts on this. And maybe you haven't thought of this before. You and I haven't talked about this, but she made the comment in coaching girls compared to boys that in most cases, I don't think this is universally the case with every woman or girl athlete, but that when you coach a girl, she's more interested, especially if her coach is a man, she said, in being having the coach be happy with her or proud of the way she played than necessarily the result. Meaning, she coached at BYU, Allie did, and she said, I'd see these girls get chewed out by a male coach, and it would just sometimes break them a little bit. Where the men basketball player would say, oh yeah, watch this. And they'd go out and they'd play hard and they'd win the game, and they'd say, and the coach could say, see, that's why I wanted you to dig deep. And yeah, coach, you got it from me. And there's this where the girl would feel like I'm disappointing coach. Mm-hmm. I don't want to disappoint coach. And so that almost would be a head game, because they would feel like almost retract a little bit because they feel like they're disappointing their coach when they get critiqued or yelled at. Is that something that you see with male coaches coaching women? Is that accurate now? I mean, this was 10 years or so ago that Allie said this.
Yeah. There's a lot of boys lacrosse players who then turn into female lacrosse coaches. And I've had, as the UHSAA president, I had a lot of opportunities to meet with, like, we'd go to lunch or we'd do a Zoom call with these new coaches, and they'd be like, what's the biggest difference between the girls' game and the boys' game? And obviously, if you've ever seen lacrosse, boys and girls lacrosse is completely different. But one of the first things I would always tell these coaches is you're going to have to talk to your girl players a lot differently than you talk to your boy players, because they do accept feedback very differently. And I've never been a boys coach, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But on the girls' side, I try to do as much positive reinforcement as I can. My players, and obviously there's a couple that are outliers here, but I would say the majority of my players really respond better to positive feedback. So when they do something well, I hammer that like crazy. You know, it's like teaching a dog. Maybe I shouldn't compare my players to a dog, but it's like teaching a puppy potty training, right? When they go outside and they potty outside, you are like hyping them up. You're giving so many treats, and you reinforce that positive behavior. And the negative behavior, you of course have to correct, but you do it in a way that they can absorb, not right in the moment and not with some harsh feedback. I would say 99% of my players do not respond well to harsh feedback, but instead they want me to pull them aside and say, hey, you did this really well. This dodge was really well, really executed well, but you need more space in front of your defender or whatever it is. So I think that's one of the biggest differences. And I think I've again talked to a lot of male coaches who are now coaching females, and they've said that they've had to kind of change the way that they give feedback. It's also very apparent that girl sports are more team oriented, where the girls really need to feel connected to their teammates to be the most successful. Where I think that happens on the boys' side as well, but I think even more so at the next level for the girls.
You know, I think in relation to that, and Dustin and I have talked about this before, but I did this little experiment because of this article I wrote. I got asked to go to a bunch of dance things, and my daughters were dancers, and to speak at them. And I would do these motivationals with drill teams before state, and I've done 3 or 4 of those. And I the first time I ever did it, I took a poll of the girls that I said, as you approach state, what are you most afraid of? Like, what's the fear in your heart? And I had some multiple choice answers. One of them was losing to my rival. The other was not placing as high as we have in the past. Another one was letting down my teammates because it was my mistake that cost us, or letting down my coach. Those were in the same. I'm telling you, Nash and Dustin, it was universal. I'm talking like not even a single answer in 4 of those meetings was anything other than I'm so afraid of letting down my teammates and my coaches. And I don't know how that would translate on the male side of things, but I know that this was all girls. And I just realized that I did not expect, because I actually went into those presentations thinking, okay, I'm going to take each of these fears and I'm going to talk about, some principles in relationships. So I was ready to talk about, don't worry about your rival. Like, let's talk about being your best and not the best. I had all these principles, right? But when it was 100% in all 4 meetings, I'm afraid of letting down my team and my coaches. Then I started to realize there's really something here, especially with these girls. And so we had these conversations where I brought up the team captains and I said, okay, so if they're most afraid of letting down each other, then it's your job as a team, because you aren't supposed to go into a competition with fear in your heart. You're not going to perform as well. What can you do as leaders to alleviate that fear? And they would talk to them. But as they said things, like the girls would bust into tears, and they would to have a captain say, hey, look, we've watched how hard you've worked. We know people slip. We know people fall out of things. We know people don't hit aerials. We know that. Don't worry about that. We've seen your effort. Let's just go give it our all and let the outcome be the outcome. And we're never going to judge you for it. And I would actually stop. And I would say, really, though? Because if you say this now, and then you're driving home and being like, frickin' Allie, she fell out of her, then you're all talk. Are you really going to accept whatever product goes out there because everyone's done their best? And anyway, sorry, that was long, but that was enlightening to me. I thought of what Allie said, Dustin, that you brought up, that the fears sometimes in a female athlete's hearts might be a little bit different. And if we know that, then we can address it, and we could say, let's address what you're feeling. And anyway, everything you guys are saying just speaks to my heart as a dad of all daughters, watching what they've been through in their athletic experience. I think it's important to realize.
And I think one of the, when I have a new coach that I'm trying to train up with my club team or high school team, one of the first things I say is your tone of voice. I can say the exact same thing with a different tone of voice, and the message gets across in a much different way. I mean, we all know that being married, right? Your tone of voice in a conversation with your spouse can change how that conversation goes. And the same thing goes with your players. So, I mean, with Allie at the BYU basketball coach, mm-hmm. She had a point where you have to treat them differently a little bit, but really you could say the same thing just in a different tone of voice, and that would have a long-lasting different effect on them. Yeah,
same coaching, yes, but concentrate on tone, not just substance.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And that's hard to do. That's hard to change your tone. So much that I just tell my guys that I coach, just try to focus on what I'm saying and not the way I'm saying it. Because that's probably the chicken way out of, I don't know that I can change my tone. I don't know in football if it comes across the same if I say, hey, would you mind please moving your butt a little bit faster and blocking him a little bit harder so we don't lose by 40? Would you mind doing that, please? I don't think that, but
a little different.
No, but you're right. The tone of your voice can have a very negative, sarcastic. When, for example, so, if kids are listening to this, or coaches have definitely heard this in football, let's say that the team jumps off sides at practice. And you always get this. If you've been around a football practice, you get this. You'll get 5 or 6 of the kids, usually not the ones on the field, that'll scream out, come on, let's go. Come on, pay attention. Let's go. Okay, the whole tone of what I just said is all negative. The same thing could be said, hey, come on, let's go. Come on, we got this. Pay attention. Let's go. Come on, next play.
Exactly.
Same thing, Totally different tone. One is move on, it happens, let's go, pay attention, be better the next play. The other one is, oh my gosh, this is so bad, this is so miserable, holy, we're awful, what the heck's happening here? And it just brings the mood down. And you can almost feel just this, it just sucks out some of the energy. And I think good coaches, when they start to recognize that, and that has nothing to do with boys or girls sports. Or good leaders, good captains have to be able to see that and to your point about tone, change the tone of even the way that that the kids are talking and the way that the coaches are talking. Because we know as coaches, right, when the tone is probably the same in our houses, right? In our households, we as parents, our tone can really be a lot harsher than it needs to be when we want our kids to pick something up. Probably didn't need to say it in such a tone that it scared our kid, scared our daughter. Wasn't that big of a deal. And anyway, one other question for you that I had, and then I know Shad had a couple that he wanted to ask you. So when you were playing lacrosse in college, that was, believe it or not, everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube, Nash is not 23. She's is it 34 or 35?
I'm 35.
Yeah, she looks like she's 23 if you're not watching this on that's what I thought when we were chatting the other day and I first met you. When you were playing at BYU, lacrosse wasn't as big of a sport obviously as it is now. It's grown, which is awesome. How did you manage your day as an athlete with all of and now if it's different now because the demands on athletes have only gotten more intense. How do you teach somebody to, we call it win the hour. And you remember me talking about this. How do you teach kids with all the stuff they have going on to manage their day? And then how do we teach them to use, Shad in his presentations talks about this discretionary time. There's not a lot of it in a kid's day, but what they do have, according to national statistics, is filled up with usually cell phone use, social media, gaming, something on their phone, just scrolling through reels and different things. How do we teach kids to manage their time better, especially as an athlete? Was that hard for you pre-crazy social media time when you were in college?
Yeah. I feel lucky because I didn't really grow up in the social media era. I mean, when I was at BYU, there was Facebook, but it was only attached to your desktop. And so it wasn't in your face all the time. And I feel like I did a pretty good job of managing my time because I was so lacrosse focused, probably a little too much lacrosse focused than school focused, but I just loved it. And I really thrived on routine. That's how I've been my whole life. So I knew that I was going to wake up and I'd have morning classes. And then I'd go hit the gym and do some running or weights or something, typically running because weights weren't even that big of a deal when I played back in college. And then I'd go to practice. And then I made sure I had time. Like I had fun in college too. I had great friends and we went out and went to dinner, did things. And so I think I was lucky because it was kind of like set up for me in that way. And I just had that mentality. I think I've seen a huge change in the last few years as a teacher and a coach, seeing social media, cell phone usage becoming a huge deterrent to kids. I mean, as a teacher, constantly, I'd say, put away your phone, put away your phone, put away your phone, and my whole thing as a teacher was I wanted to teach them to use it appropriately because cell phones have a place in our world. We're always going to have them. They're always going to be there. And as a coach, there are times when I'm like, I need to know if you're going to get on the bus today, so I do want you to be responsive on your phone, but there's also a time where you need to, and this is the tricky part. It's totally up to that student, that teenager to turn it off, to put it down. And social media is so hard because there is so much good, but also so much bad. Like I send my girls clips from social media about drills or plays or wall ball routines they can do or workouts they can do. So there is so much good on it, but it's up to them as individuals to turn it off when it becomes bad, when it's taking up their sleep, when it's changing their mental health, when it's changing their body image. That is up to them to turn it off or to unfollow people and mute people. And I think it's a huge challenge that I see it in my players every day where they're late to practice because they were scrolling too long and didn't get their cleats or didn't get in the car fast enough. But it's not on their parents and it's not on us as coaches. That's on them to make that change. So it's a hard battle to fight.
something you said there, and it was a little part of your point, which was awesome and incredible. And we'll be clipping that and sharing it a number of times. That was great thoughts on that. And I love your balance there, that we aren't anti-cell phone. We're anti-using cell phone in detrimental ways, right? I've been cutting up some video that we did with Danny Ainge, was the person I'm going to talk about, at our golf tournament just a couple of weeks ago. And we asked, the question that Danny Ainge was asked on this video was, what advice would you give to someone who wants to be great? His answer was really cool to me because it spoke truth to my own experience. And it was, you got to find something that you love. If you find something that you love, then you'll want to dedicate a bunch of time to it. And that's really what helps you become great. And in essence, I'm not quoting him exactly, but it's going to be really hard to be great at something that you don't love, you're not passionate about. And I do think that sometimes that isn't talked about enough when we talk about what it takes to be great, is finding something like you found. You said you played a lot of sports and then you found lacrosse, and all of a sudden that just became this very healthy, physically, mentally healthy, got you teammates, like all these things. You fell in love with something that was just the thing that you thought about when there was nothing else to think about. And if you were a teenager back then, you probably would have been scrolling through lacrosse drills and videos and advice. And that's healthy. That's good. That's not some of the detrimental stuff that's out there because you're trying to learn. I just wanted to point that out, Dustin, that, I think that sometimes we try to get our kids to be really like, oh, you need to work hard, you need to do all these things, where sometimes if they aren't working hard kind of naturally, organically, then maybe we need to help expose them to things until they find something that they're passionate about, whether that's a different sport or not a sport, but help them find their passion, and then they won't feel like they have to be motivated all the time. They just can't help but doing it. And I just saw that in your answer. And I think it's a big part of winning the hour, that just gives one more little facet, Dustin, that we haven't talked a ton about. We've talked a little bit about that, but sometimes we give all these work ethic speeches when it might be not a work ethic problem. It's I don't really like this problem.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too goes back to, like I tell my girls are required to do 10 minutes of wall ball every day. That's it, 10 minutes, because I know as a player, I loved it so much, my 10 minutes turned into 30. And I'm like, again, I would have been that girl on Instagram, like, how do I do a behind the back wall ball? And I would have been researching that. So recognizing if you love it, you're going to put more time into it. And I think to your point too, recognizing the short term versus long term, like short term benefits versus the long term benefits, and choosing what's most important to you. I was listening to one of your guys' podcasts a couple of weeks ago where, Dustin, you talked about that it's okay to say no. And if sports is not what they're passionate about, and it's not what they're going to want to put their time into, and instead it's art or drama or working, they can decide what to do, and it's okay to change paths.
Well, I think Shad, actually said that point of no, but it's true. And that is that we, especially as kids, they want to make us proud. And whether they're a girl or a boy, they want to make mom and dad proud. And when they see mom and dad happy and congratulatory towards them and celebrating and taking them out to dinner after the game, only when they play really well and only when they're successful and they do well, mom and dad are happy. But to Shad's point, if I don't really love this, you're constantly telling me to go work, and we're just guilting them into working hard, then that's not going to have the long-term effect that we want. In fact, I would argue in some cases, it creates a wedge later between mom and dad and the kid, because the kid has this animosity towards the only time. I have to be very careful with it myself right now, because I'm coaching my son, and his best friends that I've coached since they were in like third grade are currently seniors at the school that I'm coaching at. And I know these boys really well, and they've heard me all the time, work. I don't want it to be that the only time they remember me talking with them was are you working? And it is sometimes. I've caught myself saying, man, I saw him outside of practice today for 20 minutes, and all I did was talk about, what did you eat today? How much sleep did you get? Did you get your room clean? Did you do this? Did you do that? Is the lawn mowed? Did you lift extra? Did you get your running in? Like all these things I'm constantly just pressing. And, you know, if the athlete or the boy or the girl of ours that doesn't love it, to Shad's point, and we're making them do it, that's just going to create it might create this feeling of, I can't wait to be done with this. I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like playing, but I don't love it enough I want to go snowboard, or I want to go camping. I want to do I don't care if I go and play in college. Dad, you do, right? Or mom, you do, but I don't. If I'm not all state, I'm good with it. I just want to play high school sports, and right. And sometimes as coaches too, we have to realize we can't want it so much more than our players, that we expect them to do because we want it so bad. If it's not what they want, we can't make them play harder. We can scream and yell till we're blue in the face, but they might not just care. And that's hard for us as coaches because we put time and energy in it, and we want to win as well. But that's a hard thing to do, I think, as a coach and a parent, to step back and say, okay, wait a minute. Am I doing this more for me? Really, to be honest, right? Am I really putting in this time and energy because I care about the kid or my son or my daughter? Or is it because I care about my win and loss record as a coach, what people think about me as a coach, or as a mom or a dad, what people are going to say about my Instagram posts about my son or daughter when they get the All-State award and they get the scholarship and they get and that's hard. We all, struggle with that, but I think it's something we should constantly be aware of, because Shad, to your point, Nash as well, that we have to be able to say no sometimes. And as parents, I think it'd be really smart to say, look, how bad do you really want this? Right? Do you want me to push you hard? Because if you don't, just tell me. But if you really want this, I'll give you every opportunity, but I'm going to push you so that you can, because you have a skill set, right? And do you really want it though? Like, do you want me to push you? Or do you want me to just be mom and dad, or just, back off and have that conversation with our kid? Shad, did you ever have to have that with your daughters?
Absolutely.
You have two that are out of the house now. Did you ever have to have that with them?
Well, and it's particularly with my third, right? Because my other two danced and became college dancers. And my third one came to me and she was like, I hate dance. Right. And my wife was a college dancer. And I remember telling her, like, I don't care what you do. Just, I want you to try to learn to be great at things, like follow your own passions. Right. And so she did her last little dance. This is one of the funniest stories of my entire life. I was watching her up there. She had kind of a main part, and she was just doing just as cute as could be. And we were like, that's great. Grandma and grandpas came to watch her. And my wife and I actually had this conversation. Like, I don't know if she's going to quit after that, because she looked pretty happy up there. She literally comes walking out of the auditorium. We're all standing there with flowers ready to congratulate her. And she throws her arms in the air. She's like 12 years old, goes, I'm done with dance, And it was like, oh, and then she switched to tennis and she started to play tennis. And now she's doing some other things with like youth city council. And I really, in fact, my wife came to the presentation I did the other night, Dustin. You were there as well. But I had her come because I was like, I'd love you to give me some feedback. And one of the things that she really gave me feedback on is she said, you're talking to some kids who want to be great at sports. You need to add something in to your presentation. And that is that some of you right now, football might be the thing you're trying to excel at. But for others of you, that's not one of the main things in your life you really want to excel at. So she said, maybe put a portion in the presentation to where they really think, what do I really want to be great at in my life? Because there's, 20 kids there that are thinking football is that thing. But there's other kids, they might not even be starting, like the the backup left guard of a high school football team who's having fun playing football, he's not sitting there looking at life through the lens of football. If he's a senior, he's probably thinking of some other stuff. And so I think that allowing our kids to explore and to not pigeonholing them in to like, this is the thing you're going to be great at. I think that there's an obligation to team to give effort and focus when you're with your team and to do those things to be great if you're going to be part of a team, but not tie them in. And as you were talking, Dustin, and there's James Clear, high school or college baseball player, played professionally. He wrote the book Atomic Habits. But I've shared this before, but he talked about how it's really important to let young kids play a variety of different sports because you don't know if maybe they have a gift and the like physical makeup and everything else to excel one area where they're not going to excel in another. And if we decide what our kids are going to do, what he shared, the example is Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps has kind of these short legs for a tall guy, and this long old torso with great lung capacity, which is perfect for swimming, right? Like he is built. If you were to build a swimmer, Michael Phelps is a swimmer. And he compared that to this guy who's a marathon runner, who's like super light, like feather boned, long old legs. And he said, what if their parents would have said, no, we're swimmers in this family, to the marathon runner and to Michael Phelps, we run in this family. He would have been a very average runner. And so I think we need to give kids autonomy to explore and to think about what they really love and what comes natural to them. And then where they gravitate, we help them put effort toward and focus and give them resources there. But maybe too often we kind of decide what we want people to be great at, when that might not be their interest. And if they're not, they're never going to have enough interest, because it's those kids, Nash, that go outside and spend an hour with wall ball just because they love it and it's the one lacrosse thing they could do while they're at home with nobody else. Those are the kids that are going to be good at it, right? And so regardless of whether or not it's athletic, ability or anything like that. So if we could find that thing that our kids do when there's nothing else to do, that they just long to do it, then it'll be so natural to put the energy toward it to be great. And it will just feel so natural to them that they don't need a pep talk. They just love it. So sorry, that was long, Dustin, but that your guys' thoughts, that's what it made me think about there.
Yeah. Melissa, any last thoughts? If we have anybody, boy or girl, mom, dad, coach, listening to this right now, having coached for a lot of years, you said 14 years, right, as a high school coach and also with your club, what advice would you give to parents? That's the majority of our listeners are parents, to make sure they get the most out of this moment with their child athlete.
That's a great question. There's so many things, but if I was talking to a parent, it'd be kind of what Shad just talked about, like let them take the lead. And I have so many parents that they want their girls to play travel club lacrosse, but then the girls don't really want to. And so letting them take the lead and really decide where they want to put that extra time that they have, because nowadays we know teenagers don't have a ton of extra time. So letting them take the lead a little bit and letting them decide how hard they want to push things. I feel really lucky. I had parents who, I had to buy my own first stick. My parents were like, you do so many other sports. So I bought my own stick, and it wasn't until that I was really invested that my parents also became invested in. They let me take the lead. And when I started trying to get recruited by college teams, my parents let me take the lead, and I set up the first phone calls. And then once they started seeing me, then they offered help and edited my emails and talked me through how to talk to a coach on a Zoom call or whatever. And I think by letting your players take the lead, that's going to teach them so many skills, first of all, but also then you can follow their lead and see what they really want to spend their time and your money on.
Well, Nash, thank you again. Everything you said, Shad, I think we covered a lot today. Nash, thank you for coming on, especially to discuss about those things specifically to female athletes. We don't our world isn't as much female athletes as we'd like it to be. And you and I have talked about that. So we hope to be able to draw on and lean on you for more ways that we can better help the female athletes that we work with. And so we'll probably ask you to come on again and be a part of some of the upcoming events that we're going to be doing. And we appreciate you taking a minute to hop on with us. Everybody, please like the podcast, share it. Please talk to people about, especially for athletes, help us get in front of more kids, follow us on social media. Most importantly, keep your eyes up and do the work.
This has been the Sportlight Podcast from Especially for Athletes, sponsored by Coca-Cola. You can learn more about Especially for Athletes by visiting the website at especiallyforathletes.org. You can also learn more about the book, The Sportlight, by Shad Martin and Dustin Smith at especiallyforathletes.org/book.